that sunlight is over 50% red and infrared light. And that actually increases as we get towards the beginning and the end of each day. When we're talking about red and infrared light supporting mitochondrial function, we're talking about the production of energy, and we're talking about the production of deuterium-depleted metabolic water inside of ourselves. And we're meant to be bathed in red and infrared light from sun up till sundown. No matter what time of day it is, if the sun is up, there is an abundance of red and infrared light. We're talking about a very blue-shifted light environment that is absent in red and infrared light as well as UV light. And this is exacerbated as well by the window glass that is used in standard window panes, which blocks almost all near-infrared light, about 30% of UVA light, and all of UVB light. And so simply by sitting indoors behind glass, you're already concentrating the blue part of the light spectrum from sunlight. So anytime anybody, tells me, oh, I have great natural light in my home, unless those windows are open or your doors are open, that is not natural light, in fact. That is artificial light already without even adding any of the light fixtures into the mix. In nature, we always receive blue light with an abundance of red and infrared. How that when we're exposed to a lot of these artificial lights, during the day, but especially at night, we are directly blunting melatonin release from the pineal gland, which is responsible for helping us to get sleepy, to fall asleep, and get good quality sleep throughout the night. I challenge all the ophthalmologists and dermatologists to answer me this. Why would our bodies express a receptor all over our surfaces for UVA light if we weren't meant to receive it?
Hello, everybody. I have some fascinating information to share. What I do in my health journey is I get up and I listen and I look for things that are going to help me promote longevity and health. Those of you that know me know I want to do everything possible to avoid suffering from disease. I want to make my body as strong as I could possibly make it for as long as I possibly can. And today on the show, I'm going to comment on a video by a lady I started following recently who confirms what I've been saying all the way from my book, The Daylight Diet, and all the way in between about the connection between light and health. Between light and health. We're going to break this conversation down because, like I say in The Daylight Diet, the light affects digestion, and at nighttime is the time to be sleeping. So we're going to listen to this podcast today, but this is such important information for you all to understand. And like when I wrote my Daylight Diet, I was looking at digestion, but even from a standpoint of sleep, all health is determined by the quality of our sleep, but our diet is going to determine the quality of our health. So we keep these things in mind and how important the light is, but this doctor is bringing in new information, not only talking about light and our digestion or nighttime and our sleep, but also getting daylight for overall health in our body. And what I've learned from eating less and less food is when we're out in nature and we're experiencing all the different colors of the light, for some reason we're not as hungry as we are when we're stuck inside. And she confirms it in this talk and just in general by understanding how the different rays of the lights work. So she's going to talk about these here today. So let's open this up here and let's see this amazing information. So you could find Dr. Alexis Cowan all over the internet. I'll put links below to her information, but today she's on this fella's show here, which is this is one of the many podcasts she's on, but this one is Greg Caldwell's show here, and I'll put a link to the original video of this below. But we're gonna hear the stuff that she's saying because it is just such what I've been teaching people and talking about for quite a long time now, and let's just hear this and then we'll comment on it because this is just right on. It's right on the information. So let's go and listen to it now.
Don't also realize that sunlight is over 50% red and infrared light. And that actually increases as we get towards the beginning and the end of each day. So if we look at sunrise and sunset light, we're looking at 80+% red and infrared light. And as that's...
So let me just fill you in a little bit here. The light that we're getting has particular colors. And there's 4 particular colors. There's red, infrared, then there's the blue, and then there's the ultraviolet rays. Now there's a whole bunch of others on that spectrum, from violet to yellow to orange. But the way it worked in a combination with the rays from the sun, when you get them all in the proper combination, that's going to produce the most health in your body. And it literally affects everything from nutrition on a cellular level and everything. It's such an important thing to understand that most people don't talk about. And I've been talking about this since the Daylight Diet book to a degree, but just learning and implying more and more. A lot of people, including myself, talk a lot about sleep and making sure it's dark when you sleep, because you don't want certain lights to get in when you're sleeping that will affect your sleep. But in the daytime, when you're eating, it really is a great science that this doctor is bringing more information about. What we have in our house is now 100% blue lights, and it's a problem. And when people spend 90% of their time indoors, and all they get is this blue light, whenever you take out of the order that the sun was meant to get these rays, you're going to create a problem one way or the other. You want the combination of them. To sum it up, get out in the sun, and you know what? When the sun is at its lowest and its highest, sunrise and sunset, that's when you're going to get the most of these red rays and these the red lit rays and also the infrared rays, and they all have a function to do with how the body works. And then the ultraviolet rays that we're told to wear sunscreen and don't get on our bodies, well, they're actually good and healthy for us. And if you prepare your body the right way, you're not going to get sunburned. You're going to be healthy. You got to use wisdom. Let's hear. I just want to give you the beginning of that.
Sunlight approaches midday, we're getting an increase in the amount of the short wavelength blue, UVA, and UVB rays. And so when we're talking about the spectrum of sunlight, we're really looking at the whole visible spectrum. So the way that actually people can verify this for themselves, let's say, because if you look at sunlight, it's not intuitive that there's, Roy G. Biv, red through violet light present in sunlight. But if you're outside and you look at something red, or you look at something green, you look at a green plant, the reason that plant looks green is because green light from the environment is being reflected off of that plant into your eyeballs. And that actually involves some really cool things about like DHA, which maybe we can get into later.
Amazing. How to stop this, because you're talking about when we have deficiencies, most people look at vitamin D from the sun, but there's other nutrients you get from the sun as well. And as I said earlier, when I'm out in the daylight more often, I'm getting my nutrition from the sun. I'm not as hungry as if I was indoors, especially the number one time people eat their food, the most common time people eat their food is at nighttime. Isn't that amazing? With this information that's coming out here, to see that. Overweight people eat late at night and they stay in their house more throughout the day, not getting these rays that are supposed to dictate when we eat, when we don't eat, and so on. But just astonishing information also on a nutritional level. It's not only the eyes that we're getting the sun in. That's another thing. It's not only eyes, it's every part of our body. So she's going to talk more about later about soaking in the sunlight each day to get outside and get the sun on your skin. And I'm so excited about this because this is something I've been studying and watching, and it has such an impact on what we're eating. And what she just spoke about is the different colors of the rays reflecting on like leaves have chlorophyll, and they're getting from the green rays of the sun and all these different rays. Well, understand, when you eat food that's grown in nature and as close to nature as possible, it literally has the nutrition from these different colored sun rays within those plants or fruits that you're eating. This is why we eat a good, colorful diet of fruits and vegetables, fresh, locally grown, and we're going to be as healthy as we can be when we're outside. But when we're inside, we change things up. We take things from the natural and become unnatural. Let's hear some more of this.
But that allows you to perceive color, right? So whenever you can actually see a color, that is an indication that that color light is present somewhere in your environment. And when it comes to sunlight, we have the full visible spectrum: red, yellow, orange, green, blue, and violet. And then on the end of violet, we have ultraviolet, UVA and UVB. And above red, we have infrared, which is broken into infrared A and infrared B. Within the infrared A, we have the near infrared rays that get a lot of attention today, I would say. And then the infrared A, the far infrared A and out into infrared B, we have these longer wavelengths that are edging towards microwaves, and radio frequencies are way down the line there, wavelength wise, which are the rays that we use in Wi-Fi, 5G, Bluetooth, etc. These are the radio frequencies, and they're not present naturally in the environment. This is a man-made kind of an environment that we're receiving. In nature, we get a very, very, very small fraction of radio frequencies in the environment. But I only mention that because I'm sure we're going to talk at some point about non-native EMFs and how they've emerged as this incredibly impactful feature of the modern milieu that is causing a ton of harm, and it's been known to do so for 70 years. But with regards to the composition of sunlight, that's what we're really talking about, infrared through ultraviolet. And each wavelength within sunlight has important features and functions. So maybe we can start at the infrared and red, as it's typically the least controversial, I would say, and move towards the most controversial in the UV rays. So infrared and red light are known to be basically nutrients for mitochondria. So both near infrared and red light can directly interact with mitochondria to increase mitochondrial water, energy, and light production. So I guess I should just give a brief overview of what mitochondria are responsible for. People may have heard about it in high school biology classes as being the powerhouses of cells, but they actually do a ton more than simply making power or energy. I really like to conceptualize mitochondria as electromagnetic antennas and electromagnetic emitters. And so what I mean by that,
So I had to pause here and say this. Electromagnetic antennas or transmitters. We don't understand, or many of you watching might not understand, the harmful impact of the unnatural or the impure or the, let's say, detached radio waves that come, and the EMFs that come that are being produced out there by the internet companies and by the cell phone towers and all of these different things. And I'll talk about more of this on the show. But understanding the connection between these things, radioactive, electricity, we are the conductors. And whenever we interfere with this electricity, it just doesn't mean how we're receiving it in terms of getting outside and exposing our skin, but also what we're receiving. When we take this, like making the blue light by itself or the red light by itself, it's not the way it was intended to be. So when we get out and we're bathing in the sun, it's so powerful, so powerful. Let's continue this. Really, please listen, because this is what's going to help you not overeat, desire to eat better foods, and be healthy overall. It's going to strengthen your body.
we say electromagnetism, that is what light is. Both the visible and the non-visible parts of the light spectrum fall into the range or the category of electromagnetism. And so when we're talking about electromagnetic emission from mitochondria, we're really talking about biophotons. So a lot of people don't know that biophotons are a major feature of all biological systems. And what I mean by that is that all biological systems make light in some form. And we've known for multiple decades now that mitochondria make a ton of these, what are typically called UPEs, ultra weak photon emissions. The reason they're called ultra weak is because these photons are not.
By the way, we hear a lot about mitochondria from a health standpoint, diet standpoint, nutrition standpoint, as the basis for making sure we're healthy and understanding this. This is what she's talking about here, but nobody's been promoting it from this standpoint, the light therapy.
Readily lost from the body. Instead, they're retained and absorbed by key molecules within the system. So although they're hard to detect from the outside using a photomultiplier, which is the typical tool that would be used to measure these things, there's a ton of them made inside. They're just kept within the system. And the primary wavelengths, there's a range of them, but some of the most important wavelengths of biophotons made within the mitochondria are in the infrared and UV range. And in particular, the UV wavelength of many of these biophotons actually falls within the UVC range, which is UV light that's stronger than what we receive from sunlight. So the sun does make UVC light, but it doesn't make it through our atmosphere, so we don't actually receive it here on Earth's surface. But UVC light is even stronger, higher energy waveform than UVB light, meaning that it has a lot of high energy. There's a lot of energy stored within those waves, and so our bodies are making those. And so that was like one of the first things that I learned. That's kind of first principles thinking, being that, if our body's making UV light that's stronger than the sun, how could it possibly be toxic? Like, there must be more to the story here, and we'll get into that.
Wow. Wow. Did you just hear that? Our body is making light when we're healthy. That's the function of what we're supposed to be doing. And she talked about this in another area, and I'll show you another time about this particular type of photography, which if you take a picture of someone, you can see light around them, or particular food, live foods, foods that is grown in nature, having this light around them. But if you pick those, the longer it's been picked, that light diminishes. When I speak about live food and raw food and cooked food, that's the difference. Well, it's the same thing with healthy people or unhealthy people. This isn't mystic stuff, folks. This is science and truth. And did you hear what she just said? This doctor, we make these ultraviolet light that is more powerful than the sun.
More in a little bit, but suffice to say for now, the body's making UV and infrared light, a ton of it, and it's really, really important from a bioenergetic standpoint. People can prove to themselves that the body makes infrared light. If you ever have an infrared camera or you see any infrared camera footage online, you can look at somebody on an infrared camera, and that's because they're emitting a ton of infrared light, aka heat. So infrared radiation is just another word for heat. And our bodies make a ton of heat because we are endotherms, meaning that we have to produce our own heat to regulate our body temperatures, unlike the exotherms, like reptiles, for example, that bask in the sun in order to take on that infrared rays. And so we are literally light beings making a ton of light. We just happen to not be able to see this light because both UV and IR rays are in the non-visible parts of the spectrum. So we can't perceive it with our eyes, but it's very much there. So this is mitochondria. They're making a ton of biophotons. They're also making energy in the form of ATP, but they're also making something else that's called deuterium-depleted metabolic water. This is all inherent to what's called the electron transport chain, which is the pathway by which the mitochondria actually make ATP, which is the thing that people will probably be most familiar with, which is this like chemical energy reserve. So anyway, to zoom back out to the red and infrared light story, when we're talking about red and infrared light supporting mitochondrial function, we're talking about all these things. We're talking about the production of light inside. We're talking about the production of energy, and we're talking about the production of deuterium-depleted metabolic water inside of ourselves. And we're meant to be bathed in red and infrared light from sun up till sundown. No matter what time of day it is, if the sun is up, there is an abundance of red and infrared light. The near infrared component of infrared light is particularly important because it has the most penetrance. So it can penetrate the deepest into the body. It can go through the skin. It can go through bone. It can go through hair. It can go through clothing even. And so near infrared light is particularly important when we're talking about bathing even the deepest mitochondria in our body with these healing frequencies that facilitate mitochondrial function. Modern indoor environments are completely devoid of near infrared light. So if we look at energy efficient, quote unquote, light bulbs, we're thinking about LED.
You hear that? Indoor light is completely void of this important infrared light. Keep that in mind. And now she's going to talk about why. The light bulbs. They made it against the law to have infrared light in your house. Check this out.
Fluorescent bulbs, as well as our device screens, our laptops, our phones, our desktop computers, our TVs, tablets. These are all highly shifted towards blue wavelength light and away from red and infrared light, because infrared light is seen as a waste product because it is not contributing to the brightness of the device or the light bulb. And there's no recognition that infrared light is actually an essential nutrient for the body by these government entities that are deciding what the standards should be for indoor artificial lights. And so the result is that we're sitting in indoor environments. 90% of Americans' time is spent indoors, 90% or more, in fact, in some cases. And so when we're talking about the indoor milieu, we're talking about a very blue shifted light environment that is absent in red and infrared light as well as UV light. And this is exacerbated as well by the window glass that is used in standard window panes, which blocks almost all near infrared light, about 30% of UVA light, and all of UVB light. And so simply by sitting indoors behind glass, you're already concentrating the blue part of the light spectrum from sunlight. So anytime anybody, tells me, "Oh, I have great natural light in my home," unless those windows are open or your doors are open, that is not natural light, in fact. That is artificial light already without even adding any of the light fixtures into the mix. And so that's kind of the red and infrared part of the story. We are highly deficient in it as a species, as a modern indoor living species. The next part of the spectrum I'll talk about is blue. So I mentioned that our indoor environments are very blue shifted. Blue light is very important from a biological regulation standpoint. So blue light is the primary input that is regulating our circadian rhythms.
So circadian rhythms and is what I talk about a lot with diet, but she spoke about the red and the infrared. Now she's talking about blue, and then she's going to talk about the ultraviolet. Write this down, folks. And then in another episode, I'll give you some things we can do about this and talk about these things. And even in this episode, she gives information about some things you can do. But write this down and understand the importance of those four colors every day in combination within us.
So many people have probably heard of circadian rhythm, but just briefly, the circadian rhythm is the 24-hour cycle in the human body. And it is primarily dictated by cycles of light and dark in the environment. So those are the two primary inputs that are allowing the master clock in the brain, the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, to understand what time of day it is, and to then send all of the endocrine signals to the rest of the body about, okay, this is what time it is, we need to engage in these behaviors. Because if it's bright out and there's lots of blue light present, midday sun is about 25% blue light, but it's always balanced with an abundance of red and infrared light, which is important because blue light in isolation actually impairs mitochondrial function. And actually, side note, I know we'll talk about melanoma a little bit later, but there is published literature going back many, many years showing that exposure to fluorescent lights can actually increase the severity and risk of developing melanoma. So take that for what we will. We'll get back to that a little bit later. But that blue light in isolation impairs mitochondrial function in the skin, eyes, and proximal brain regions where it's reaching. And, that's not something you want to do. And again, in nature, we always receive blue light with an abundance of red and infrared.
Wow. Did you hear that? The blue light that's filtered, that's in our houses exclusively these days, impair the mitochondrial functions. And it was meant to be combined. We need the blue light, but it's meant to be combined. The light in our house is harming us. If we spend so much time in our houses, we're doing it to ourselves, folks. The screens we hear a lot about now with the screens with the blue screens and the blue lights, but even the lights and the light bulbs and everything else. If you can see here, I tried to come up with some sort of conclusion. I have a red light and a standard blue light, and I have them on at the same time. It's just wow. Just wow. This information needs to get out. And this is what besides food, this is what I often watch. Things like this.
Because that red and infrared actually helps to buffer the effects of blue light on mitochondrial function. So blue light, midday, 25%. Combine that with the brightness of sunlight. If we're talking about the brightness of indoor versus outdoor environments, indoor, we're looking at max a couple thousand lux, which is a measure of brightness. Outdoors on a sunny day, we're talking 100,000 plus lux. So the brightness of the light is much, much, much higher outside. And light brightness is also a very important aspect or input to circadian biology to help turn on the processes that are supposed to happen during the day. And those include cognition, digestion, movement, metabolism. These are all functions that are important to be able to upregulate during the daytime when we need to access these faculties. Contrast that with nighttime. At night, we're supposed to get darkness that is devoid of blue light, that is devoid of bright light. And that also, I would argue, includes non-native EMFs because, again, these are sources of light in the environment, whether we see them or not. Our cells are looking and expecting to receive darkness at night, which is what allows the other program to turn on in the circadian system, which has to do with regeneration, cellular cleanup, autophagy, mitophagy, cellular turnover. Very, very important part of the day. So, in summary, there, with regards to circadian biology, both bright, full spectrum light from the sun and dark darkness at night are equally important when it comes to having a healthy circadian rhythm.
See, I've been focusing and been looking into the darkness of the night and not getting that bright light in at nighttime. Not realizing what something I realized recently, which she talks about, is we're inside all day. We're getting this artificial bright light that's nowhere near as bright as the bright light from the sun, and the sunlight and rays are combined with the other colored rays. It's so important to be outside as much as possible. So exciting to find this information out and to start working on fixing this issue.
Not one is more important than the other, and that's why nature is a decentralized system. There's no one single controller. It is controlled by two different things, light and dark, at the same time. And so we need both of those if we want to have health in general and also have a healthy circadian rhythm as well. So blue light is the primary input that is telling that master clock in the brain, hey, it's daytime. We need to activate daytime functions, which also upregulates sympathetic drive, movement, drive, cognition, these types of things. However, the blue light that we're receiving in indoor environments is not natural. It's very alien because we're not receiving it in the proper balance with other wavelengths of light.
And there it is, folks. There it is. We need the daylight and the darkness to dictate, to dictate what we're doing in terms of eating, sleeping, and so on. But you got to get it in the right balance.
Instead, we're kind of getting pushed too far in that direction where we're actually leading to burnout and sympathetic overdrive and elevating cortisol levels. And we'll talk about the POMC story when we talk about UV light. It also kind of relates as well to blue light exposure, but I'll link it back later. But suffice to say for now that when we're exposed to a lot of these artificial lights during the day, but especially at night, we are directly blunting melatonin release from the pineal gland, which is responsible for helping us to get sleepy, to fall asleep, and get good quality sleep throughout the night. That blue light directly impairs that release. Furthermore, if we didn't get enough bright full spectrum light during the day, we don't even have the serotonin available to convert to melatonin to make that, melatonin available for us to get that good quality sleep and fall asleep easily. So again, this is a two-factor story. We need both the bright light during the day and the darkness at night if we're looking to optimize sleep quality. And so the blue light that we're getting in our indoor environments is a problem at nighttime for sure, from a sleep quality perspective, from a metabolism perspective, from a mental health perspective, all of these things. But then during the daytime, we're not getting any of that near-infrared light, like I mentioned, which is actually responsible for making melatonin in every mitochondria within your entire body. And it turns out the melatonin within the mitochondria is very special and distinct from the melatonin made in the pineal gland. The mitochondrial melatonin it acts as a major antioxidant within the mitochondria to help maintain the proper balance of reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. And that is actually an important part of the biophoton story, as it turns out. But it's also an important part of the mitophagy and mitochondrial biogenesis story. So those are the processes by which our bodies are able to deplete the damaged mitochondria and expand the good quality mitochondria. And so when we're missing a lot of that near-infrared light in our environments, as all modern humans are for the most part, we are missing the creation of this incredibly important subcellular factor in the form of melatonin that is actually allowing our cells to maintain quality control mechanisms. I'll move on to UV light, but I don't know if you have any questions first before I continue ranting.
No, I feel like you've talked about this before, but I do have just a couple things in my notes, and this is UVA and B related, which you're going to talk about, but UVA light is a primary stimulus of nitric oxide production in the body, and NO is a free radical that stimulates the blood vessels to dilate, allowing for the delivery of nutrients and oxygen to tissues and the removal of metabolic waste products. NO is produced whenever UVA light touches your body. In other words, the more skin you can expose, the more benefits you will receive. And then you say in the book, side note, NO deficiency in the blood vessels of the genitals is a primary defect in hypertension, high blood pressure, and erectile dysfunction. Don't know anything about that. And then UVB, in addition to vitamin D production, UVB light also stimulates the production of a prohormone in the skin and brain called POMC, which you mentioned, POMC promotes alpha, beta, and gamma endorphins, and those endorphins boost mood, cognitive function, support healthy immune function, improve memory, reduce anxiety, reduce compulsive behaviors and addictions, and enhance baseline dopamine levels, which increases capacity for critical thinking, empathy, and open-mindedness. And you can only max the POMC if your skin and eyes are being exposed. So there's the sunglass component as well. But yeah, what did I miss there?
No, that's beautiful, and that's exactly where I'm heading next. So that's a great preface for that. So when it comes to UV light, we have these two subsets that we're exposed to from sunlight. So UVA and UVB. So with regards to UVA, you mentioned the one really important part of the story, which is the nitric oxide production part. So UVA light directly supports the production of nitric oxide in the skin. Then that nitric oxide is able to diffuse into the bloodstream, where it exerts its effects on the blood vessels, creating vasodilation, facilitating blood flow, nutrient oxygen delivery, waste tissue removal from tissues, as you mentioned. Nitric oxide is also the primary defect in cardiovascular disease, in particular hypertension, high blood pressure. And so, I mean, it makes perfect sense when we see every time people are going outside, they're typically, if they're not wearing clothing covering their skin, they're slathering on sunscreen to prevent that UVA light from interacting with their skin. And so they're missing out on this incredible cardiovascular support mechanism in the form of UVA light exposure onto the skin. There's also another part of the story, though, which is a photoreceptor or a light receptor that's expressed in the body called neuropsin. So neuropsin is specifically a UVA light detector. So it's looking for UVA light in the environment, which, another side note, I challenge all the ophthalmologists and dermatologists to answer me this. Why would our bodies express a receptor all over our surfaces for UVA light if we weren't meant to receive it? I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
So neuropsin is expressed in skin, eyes, testes as well. So that whole trend about like sunning your balls, actually scientifically backed, because neuropsin in the testes actually relates to testosterone production and fertility rates. So you actually need to get UVA light directly on that tissue to stimulate the neuropsin in that tissue. So there is something to that. Obviously, again, we're going to talk about UV light exposure. It doesn't mean to go outside and like fry yourself to a crisp. We're going to talk about, as it relates to UV light, building up the solar callus, as Jack Kruse has coined, which means that you're gradually building up your tolerance over time, but you're also modulating your lifestyle to decrease your risk of burning, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to burn because I have fair skin or something. But that's not the case.
That's quite interesting, because me being on a raw vegan diet for 30 years, I usually don't, I don't get sunburned. I'm out in the sun, I don't get sunburned. Now, I do cover my bodies when I'm out in public, but my face doesn't get sunburned. I use wisdom. I don't go out in the middle of the day and sit in the sun for hours and hours and hours. But still, when I was younger, when I wasn't healthy, I used to get sunburned all the time. And it's so interesting what she said about preparing your body to receive these rays. And it's not by wearing suntan lotion. It's by internally preparing it, and also strategically preparing it so you can adjust and adapt, where you could be able to take these rays and get the healthy benefits from it without getting the sunburns and the skin cancers.
A lot of the behaviors that modern humans are engaging in are setting them up to burn. It's not an inevitability. So those are the two main portions of the UVA light story, the nitric oxide part of the story, as well as the neuropsin part of the story. And neuropsin also plays a role in local circadian regulation. So we mentioned the master clock in the brain, the SCN. There's also peripheral clocks throughout all the tissues in the body that are regulated by that master clock, but they're also looking for signals from the environment to regulate themselves at a local level. And so this UVA light via neuropsin is another important lever in this story. Now let's talk about UVB light. Probably the most demonized of the light spectrum of the sun, but also arguably among the most important.
Funny how that works out.
I know, right? It's funny how that happens. So UVB light is, people probably know a bit about it from the vitamin D part of the story. And so UVB light is the only part of the solar spectrum that's able to catalyze the conversion of 7-dehydrocholesterol into pre-vitamin D in the skin. So UVB rays are the ones responsible for making vitamin D. We're going to talk about the vitamin D story probably in a little bit. Actually, I might as well just get into it now. So vitamin D, a lot of people are supplementing with it, right? And they think, oh, I'm doing a good thing, getting my vitamin D levels up with this supplement. I mean, some people also struggle to get their levels up with a supplement, but that's kind of another story. All of the data in the literature up through now, including some major large human trials, including the VITAL study, which took thousands of people and gave them high dose vitamin D supplements to look at health outcomes. And particularly, they were looking for outcomes in cardiovascular disease and cancer, and find next to no benefit from supplementing with vitamin D, despite the fact that adequate vitamin D status is associated with protection against cardiovascular disease and cancer, multiple cancer types. And so the takeaway from that for people should be that vitamin D in your blood is actually a biomarker of your sun exposure habits, of your time spent outdoors, and is not something that should be optimized via supplementation. It's not actually evidence-based anymore to supplement with vitamin D. What is evidence-based is all of the benefits that you get from sun exposure, even independent of vitamin D, which is what I want to get to now, because when you learn about the benefits of UVB light outside of vitamin D, it becomes very clear that you can't simply take a pill for this. It actually has to be from UVB light itself. And so that's where the POMC story enters. POMC stands for pro-opiomelanocortin. It's this complex prohormone that's made in many tissues, but the two that I'm going to focus on here are the brain via UVB light exposure to the eyes, as well as in the skin. The immune cells also make POMC, and it's also interesting to note here that the immune cells, the brain and the skin, also all come from the same embryologic origin, which is called neuroectoderm. So if anybody took a developmental biology class, this is one of the primary tissues within a developing organism that then splits off to make different tissues. So the reason I bring that up is because it's important to realize that the skin, the brain, and the immune system are tightly linked because they share the same origin together. And so when we make this POMC,
the skin, the brain, and the immune system are intertwined. So, listen, this lady, I got to have this lady on the podcast and talk to her and question her about a lot of these things and get more into them. But this information, I'm going to put a link to this full podcast because it's wonderful, this episode. Plus, I'll put a link to this doctor's Instagram page and podcast channel.
In the skin and the eyes via UVB light exposure, POMC gets cleaved into 10 different hormonal products. So I want to actually give a little bit of nuance here. Depending on what tissue is expressing POMC, depends on how many of these cleavage products become unlocked. When you're exposing your skin and your eyes to UVB light, again, when I talk about eyes exposed to UVB light, I don't mean staring directly at the sun. I just mean allowing the ambient light to come into your eyes unfiltered, not coming through sunglasses, UV blocking prescription glasses, UV blocking contacts, allowing your naked eyes to interact with the ambient light. When you do that, that triggers the production of POMC in a specific part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which is like the thermostat for the entire body. It regulates energy expenditure, it regulates appetite, it regulates body temperature, metabolic rate, all these things. So that's a unique aspect to hypothalamic production, is that all 10 POMC cleavage products are made in the hypothalamus when POMC is expressed there. Same in the skin. When you make POMC in the skin, you get the full repertoire of products. In contrast, when you make POMC in the anterior pituitary gland, which is another structure or gland within the brain, you can actually make POMC in the pituitary gland from blue light exposure. However, you don't get all the cleavage products. And what's worth noting here is that one of the cleavage products that you do unlock from blue light exposure into the eyes in the pituitary gland is called ACTH. So ACTH is the stimulator of cortisol production in the adrenal glands. So when you're exposed to blue light in the absence of UVB light, you now are making cortisol, and cortisol is kind of gets demonized. I mean, it's not all bad, right? It's an important circadian biosensor. It's supposed to be made in the morning and upregulated in the morning to help liberate glucose and fat from, storage, so that your organs and your brain in particular have this energy to come online and start to wake up for the day. But most people are sitting under artificial blue light that's completely devoid of UV and infrared light all day long, which means that they're becoming, I don't want to say cortisol dominant, but their cortisol levels are higher and more extended than they should be. And cortisol is very catabolic, so it can lead to the breakdown of tissues, breakdown of skeletal muscle. It elevates glucose levels, it elevates insulin levels. In effect, it's creating more insulin resistance within the system. which is actually a physiologic mechanism to spare resources for the brain, which is what it's meant to do in the morning. But if it's elevated, extended all day long to a certain extent, now you're actually creating and fomenting insulin resistance in your system, because if you're under that light all the time, you're literally creating that state moment to moment. So that's the blue light story as it relates to POMC production in the pituitary gland. But as it relates to hypothalamus and skin, the UVB light is the primary stimulus for POMC production in these tissues. And then we get the full repertoire of products, which I want to get into now. So 3 of the cleavage products of POMC in the hypothalamus and the skin are alpha, beta, and gamma MSH, or melanocyte stimulating hormone. As the name implies, these hormones are responsible for triggering the production of melanin within the melanocytes, so these cells that make new melanin. Melanin is a very deep, dark, pitch black pigment. It absorbs all wavelengths of light from radio frequencies out through gamma radiation. And I want to talk about melanin in a little bit as well, because it's actually like a superpower. And the more I learn about quantum and light biology, the more I realize that there's no such thing as a healthy tan propaganda, and also the demonization of having darker skin and thinking that it's like dirty and bad, and it's like socioeconomically at a lower status if you have darker skin, is a total psyop. And we'll get into why in a little bit. Like,
all right, so there's so much great information, and again, you can see the rest of this particular episode at this podcast, which is Higherside. Yeah, and look up this doctor, Alexis Cowan, online. You can find more information about her online. But the website here, or this guy, I'll put the link below to his actual podcast, so you can see this episode. I'll put the link below to that. Pretty good stuff. But this topic astonishes me. I'm really interested in this topic and learning so much more about this topic. And you should be as well if you're interested in your own health. I did reach out to Dr. Cowan, and hopefully we'll have her on the show at some point in the near future. All right, so I'm going to be talking a lot more about this on the show and tell you what I do and what I've learned to make sure you're getting the proper amount of light, how to get the proper light, and how to do it in the right balance. I'm studying this for you. I'm filtering out the information for you, and I'm going to have people on who are teaching this and talk about them as well, or about this topic with them. So put your comments or questions below, what your experience, what you know about this is. But this is something to consider and pay attention to. From a diet standpoint, we want to eat less. From a sleeping standpoint, we want to get the highest quality sleep as possible. And, like I said, when I wrote my book, The Daylight Diet, I know the connection between light and digestion. But between light and being full, I've actually interviewed people that said they eat very little because they spend much time outside. And not that they're busy, but because they're getting so-called nutrition from the sun, which sounds kind of crazy. But now science has kind of come to see the understanding of this and the dangers of the imbalanced lights. So we're going to talk more about this. Thank you for watching, everybody. Put your comments and questions below. And I'm excited about this, and you should be as well. Have a great day, everybody, and a great raw life.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show.